For 3 years now, there's been a little experiment running in my room. Just this past year, my experiment gained a little friend. Since this is the anniversary of the experiment, I figured now would be a good time to check in on the guys and see how they're doing. It has been 3 years since this Nintendo Switch OLED has been on and showing the same image from Breath of the Wild in an attempt to burn in that OLED screen. This is something that I thought would be relatively quick because of the horror stories that I've heard from previous OLED technology. But I've been pleasantly surprised by how long this has taken. Last year, Valve released their own OLED Steam Deck, and of course, I felt obligated to do the same test on that hardware too. I think this is my limit here. This is the last device that I'm gonna do this test on. I'm not running all of these devices all over my house. I'm gonna be full of OLED devices by the end of this. I think the point has been proven that OLED technology is not like it used to be. Sure, you can experience burn-in, but you have to do a lot to get there. It's not very realistic. I think you'd be just fine with basically any OLED screen you use these days. But we're not out of the woods yet. Other things can happen to a device that is on and plugged in 24/7, especially if that device has a battery in it. A great example is my old Aya Neo Nex, which I've been using as the brain for my arcade cabinet for the past year or so. It's been on and idle pretty much the whole time. Well, it's got a little case of the battery bloat. Good thing I caught that, or else I would have a major problem on my hands. Luckily, the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck are designed a little less cheaply. They're also not sitting baking in an enclosed wooden box for a year. I started this experiment a little bit late on the Steam Deck, so it's been on for somewhere around 10 months now. It's on in desktop mode at full brightness, showing the same Breath of the Wild screenshot that the Switch was. But this time, we had some room at the top because the aspect ratio of the screen is a bit different. So I added some patterns that I thought would help with the test. Those patterns should burn in a little easier and show us exactly what's going wrong with the screen. And yes, the screen did burn in. But more importantly, this Steam Deck does not work off of the charger anymore. The second it's unplugged, the whole unit just turns off. There's also been a handful of times where the Steam Deck just turns itself off. Maybe it's like forcing an update on itself and not turning itself back on. I'm not sure. But this has happened a lot more on my Steam Deck than it has on the Nintendo Switch that I've had running for 3 years now. So yeah, we're gonna look at the burn-in results thus far and compare the two devices, but we can also serve this as a warning. If you're playing hundreds of hours of a game with a lot of contrasty UI elements, maybe turn the brightness down a tad. Maybe if you're using like a PC handheld as a desktop, or you just leave your devices on a charger 100% of the time, maybe unplug it every once in a while. Maybe you're out of juice and you need a charger. Well, good thing this video's got a sponsor, and it's Ugreen. This video is sponsored by Ugreen. Oh no, what time is it? I gotta pre-order the limited edition bundle. Ah, my phone's dead. What about my laptop? Ah, not my laptop too. Hey, you guys got an outlet in here? You guys have an outlet? God, these millennials, they think the hell of themselves. Decaf for Laura? Have a good day, sweetie. I'm so sorry about your husband. I heard everything. Oh, I know. I can use my Ugreen and Nexode power bank, 20,000 milliamp hour, 130 watt. That's the whole name. This small charger packs a powerful punch with a maximum output of 100 watts. Charge this iPhone 15 to 60% or this MacBook Pro 16-inch to 43% in just 30 minutes. It can charge an iPhone 15 4 times or fully charge multiple devices while you're on the go. 3 devices at once? No problem. It's got a real nice smart display so you can show how much juice you have left, or its current voltage if you're a real nerd. It's airline approved, big enough to charge everything you have, but small enough to meet airline requirements. The Nexode power bank lineup comes with 3 different power levels for any price range. Check out the Ugreen Nexode power banks at the link in the description below. Wow, that was fast. Wait, huh? That's not what I wanted. There we go, and pre-order. Ah, shoot, did I miss the pre-order? Oh, were you trying to get Arrow the Acrobat 2? Arrow the who? I'm trying to get a PlayStation 5 over here. What are you, a loser? Hey, everybody, this guy's trying to get Arrow the Acrobat. What a loser! Ah, this coffee shop sucks. I would leave here if it was a real coffee shop and not just my kitchen. Coffee's good though. Just a quick refresher in case you need it. Both the original Nintendo Switch and the original Steam Deck used LCD displays, which are typical for devices like this. LCD screens use one big light panel in the back of the display to light the entire display. That's why you can always tell when an LCD screen is on, even if it's just showing a black image. OLED screens use millions of individually lit subpixels. Each pixel is made up of 3 super tiny LED lights, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. These lights will eventually dim over time, which is how you get these dark areas here. That's literally the lights burning out. When OLED screens first made it to market, they seemed like a really bad idea for certain devices, like ones that are gonna have a lot of static images on screen, like, for example, phones, computer monitors, or gaming devices. Now, every iPhone, since the 10, has an OLED screen in it. My current computer monitor is an OLED screen. And of course, these game consoles, they have OLED screens in them. OLED screens are cool because they can be bright as hell, and most importantly, the black levels are so deep because they are off. Black is the absence of light, so it should look like deep nothingness. It honestly looks great, especially if that display has some good HDR. The Nintendo Switch does not, but the Steam Deck does. There is some preventative things that an OLED display can do to prevent burn-in like this. You can move the pixels around very slightly so that they're not staying in one place for too long. It could detect static images and lower the contrast on those images. It could also do what's called a pixel refresh, which just basically burns in everything around the burned in area and kind of evens it out. Neither the Nintendo Switch nor the Steam Deck has any such preventative measures in them, at least to my knowledge. There's nothing in the Nintendo Switch's settings, and of course, Nintendo has never said anything about like a pixel refresh or anything like that. And Valve specifically told me that there are no such preventative measures on the Steam Deck, but that was around a year ago, and they could always fix that in an update. They're constantly firing out updates for the Steam Deck. It's like every other day, I gotta update this thing. To be honest though, I'm not convinced that either of these devices really need those preventative measures that much. This is a very unrealistic scenario. I don't think you're gonna be staring at a static image of Breath of the Wild for thousands of hours. This Nintendo Switch has been on for 26,000 hours. It was a little under the 2,000 hour mark when we started to see the slightest little hint of burn-in. And that's only if you really like looking for it. Over the 1 year mark was when things started to actually be noticeable during some gameplay. But even then, I'm not even sure if I would have sent this back if it was covered under warranty. Things sort of plateaued somewhere around the 2 year mark. Now, 3 years in, I would definitely send it back under warranty if it looked like this. It certainly would be distracting under some gameplay scenarios. But considering everything it's been through, it's really not all that bad. You can see that, of course, the bright lights from the temple ceiling have burned in the most. It's most apparent on a red background. Now the small UI elements are really burned in. They're so burned in, they aren't even blurry anymore. They're perfectly sharp and detailed. Since the Switch has been on and running this whole time, the entire screen should be dimmer. But it's only ever so slightly dimmer than a regularly used Nintendo Switch, my main Switch. You can barely even tell the difference. I'll note that these things are so bright at their peak brightness. I normally shoot my videos at f2.8. A lot of this B-roll is shot at f8. Right now I'm shooting at f5.6. This is what it would look like if I was shooting normally. The lights are so bright in here. I also shot some of the shots on my iPhone, believe it or not. I think it was a little easier to get the contrast right than it was on my camera. I mentioned before that the Nintendo Switch OLED has no such preventative measures for OLED burn-in specifically, but it does have some general protections for its display. Like, for example, the screen will dim after 5 minutes of inactivity, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no settings to change that at all. So what I did to get around that is I use a controller that has an auto fire function. This way, the controller is always pressing a button over and over again for thousands and thousands of hours. I've used this Hori controller since the start, but somewhere along the way, I switched to this GameCube style controller. That one recently died on me. The auto-fire stopped auto-firing. It just completely died out. So I switched back to the Hori ones. Congrats, Hori! You won that battle. I've also decided to check the battery life since it's been on and plugged in this entire time. It only died just a few minutes before my regularly used Switch did. And it still lasted almost 5 hours playing Smash. So I'd say the battery health is pretty strong here, even though I was using it in such an improper way. I'm impressed. This is in direct contrast to my Steam Deck, which I can't even unplug. It just turns right off. The battery just doesn't work at all. I tried everything. I tried using a different charger. I tried using a different outlet. Even though both my Switch and my Steam Deck are using the chargers that they came with. I even tried booting it into battery storage mode. None of that worked. So I can't test what the battery health is now because it's at 0. Even though it says it's 100% in desktop mode. That's bullshit. The amount of burn-in that has accumulated on here is pretty bad. It's not nearly as bad as it is on the Switch, but it's still pretty bad considering this has only been burning in for about 10 months, whereas this Nintendo Switch had a 2-year head start. Once again, it's mostly noticeable on the red and white screens, with the Zelda UI elements showing up heavy. These little color bars at the top also give us a great idea of how exactly the burn-in is happening and what colors are burning in quicker than others. You can tell by seeing which colors on the top bar drop out the deepest. Obviously, white burns in the most, but the blues and the reds seem to have dropped out pretty quickly. Surprisingly, green holds in there pretty good. This burn-in is now to the point where it's apparent when just navigating Steam, and it will for sure be distracting when playing some games, but probably not most. A game like Resident Evil probably won't show that much burn-in. A colorful game like Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom will probably show a significant amount of burn-in. My theory is that the OLED Steam Deck burned in a little bit quicker than the OLED Switch because the Steam Deck is just significantly brighter. The Switch has a peak brightness of 400 nits, but it's probably actually realistically a little less than that. And the Steam Deck has a peak brightness of 600 nits in SDR and 1,000 nits in HDR. It's probably actually a little less than that, but the point here is that that is still significantly brighter than the Switch, even though they're both using very similar display technology. The tests that I'm doing are all in SDR. So on the Steam Deck, that would be around 600 nits, maybe a little less than that. The Fox is doing a test in HDR on his Steam Deck. He wrote a program to get it to run in full HDR at 1000 nits. His Steam Deck screen is absolutely fine. Notably though, his battery life is fine. It still works off the charger. So I guess I just got unlucky with mine. He will have a video up sometime in the next day or so check that out. The last thing that I want to do is cause any alarm over this if there's no justification for that. The key takeaway here should just be that you're probably fine doing whatever you want with your OLED technology. These are very unrealistic circumstances. It's honestly amazing that they've only burned in this much after all of this abuse. You will probably never be staring at the same screenshot from Breath of the Wild for thousands of hours. You will also probably never have your device running at full brightness for this long either. The most that could happen, realistically, is you play a game that has a lot of static UI elements on screen. You would need to play that game for thousands of hours and at full brightness for it to have any sort of effect. I don't know about you guys, but when I play either of these devices, the brightness is almost always less than half. Half is usually even a lot for me. I'm never playing this thing out in the sun. The new takeaway here is to give these things a break off of the charger every once in a while. Drain that battery every so often. This shouldn't really be a problem for the Nintendo Switch, but I know a ton of people who leave their computers on 24/7, and I can see people doing that with the Steam Deck too. It's also not great to run power-intensive devices like a big beefy game while your device is charging from like 0. This works the device a little bit harder. Just turn your shit off when you're not using it. make sure you're charging it in a cool environment, not an enclosed shelf with no airflow or a big wooden box. I also recommend using the charger that the device came with as much as possible. This goes double for the Switch, which has less universal power demands. A Steam Deck can get away with using a USB-C PD charger that outputs over 45 watts, but if you're unsure if what a charger is capable of, it came with a charger for a reason. Just use that. So don't worry yourself to death. Play your games however you want. Your system will be fine. Just maybe turn the brightness down if you're playing a little bit too much Balatro, I don't know. So what do you guys think about the burn-in on the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck that we have here? Are there any other tests that you would like to see done on these things? Also, I have some homework for you. If you play like thousands of hours of a game that has a lot of UI elements on either of these displays, I'm gonna leave a Dropbox link in the description below with the images that I have here. You can even make these yourself very easily. It's just 100% blue, green, and red and white, but I have them so that they'll show up on the Nintendo Switch too. Just throw it on your Switch or your Steam Deck and see if any of the UI elements show up. I'd be interested if it could happen in a real world scenario. I doubt it, but maybe if you've got like 1,000 hours in, what fucking game do people play on the Steam Deck? Leave in the comments below, at me on Twitter, any and all this other social media garbage. Hey, we got videos here at least once a week. Also, we're on twitch.tv/Wulff, messing around with stuff like this live. You can check it out and talk in the chat there. Thank you guys very much. Have yourselves a very good week. Appreciate yous.